Welcome to a closer look at the text, the teaching component of the Bible study, Sisters in Scripture. Today we're going to talk about Ruth in chapter 7. I hope you've enjoyed reading this marvelous story of Ruth and Naomi, the book of Ruth. Is it not delightful? You know, up to this point, we've been in the book of Genesis, and the women we've encountered have had a lot of strife and turmoil in the relationships as well as the circumstances of their lives. And a lot of times when folks get into a Bible study about the women in Scripture and their relationship, they expect to encounter sterling examples of how to live beautifully. And the ones we've encountered thus far have been a bit flawed, a little bit more like ourselves. But with Ruth and Naomi, we actually encounter two women that we could aspire to emulate, to follow. When we were in the book of Genesis, we frequently talked about how important the covenant was, that this was the purpose of the stories we were reading, was to convey the centrality of the covenant, God's purposes, the relationship between God and the baby Israel, just getting going, not even named that yet, the family, Abraham, and his wives and children in that story. Also, the transmission of the covenant, that it would actually survive its beginning and be faithfully remembered and lived out from generation to generation. Now we've fast forwarded some time, and we've got this little novella that exists within the Bible. It doesn't depend on chapters before or after. It's complete unto itself, and it's a little gem of a story, and we could take it just at that level. But in fact, it is about covenant. And that's why it's there. It is the best example in all of the Hebrew Scriptures of what covenant love actually looks like. These two women live it out, particularly Ruth. The word that is used here is chesed, which is Hebrew for, the best we can translate it is loving kindness. That's the way that it's used here. But it can also mean mercy, and it has overtones of faithfulness. It is generally an adjective to describe God's attributes. Some over 200 times in the Old Testament you will encounter chesed, referring to God's relationship with humanity. For instance, in Psalm, His mercy endures forever, that's chesed. And in Isaiah 6:6, that Jesus later quotes and says, I desire mercy, not sacrifice, is chesed, loving kindness. And here it is attributed to Ruth, rightfully, because she actually acts in the way that the covenant demands of Israel. So we're going to take today, in this closer look, we're going to do something we've not done before, and that is to take the Hebrew Scriptures as a kind of a lens to look at the Christian Scriptures, and how Ruth very much resembles another woman we will encounter soon, and that is Mary, the mother of Jesus. In her complete surrender of herself to another, she is much like Mary. Let's read again the words that she says to Naomi at the that pivotal point in the story where she could have returned to Moab, but chooses instead to accompany Naomi back to their home, Naomi's home of Bethlehem. Wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Wherever you die, I will die, and there will I be buried beside you. A remarkable, resounding yes, delivering her life, her future over into someone else's care and well-being. They're attached here. In this, we see a parallel to Mary's response when Gabriel comes. Each of these women gives a yes that is unconditional. There's no if, ands, buts, or ors involved. It is yes. It is irrevocable. There is no going back. And it is lived out with remarkable fidelity. They keep their promise. Each of them gives their future, their lives over to God. When Ruth says, your God will be my God, she may not even know the God of Israel all that well except through Naomi. But nonetheless, that is what she chooses to do. And Mary, in her yes, could not possibly have known all that that would entail. And yet, nevertheless, she gives her life over to God. And not only do they give their lives over to God, but their choice means that they will be living a life that is in keeping with the poor. And Mary names that. Mary gets the importance of her yes. We'll look at this a little bit more when we get to that chapter. But even though she talks about her humility in having been asked, her lowliness, she goes on to say that through this, God will raise up the lowly and give hope to the poor. So God's saving action is at the very heart of what is going on here, and she gets it. When Ruth says yes to Naomi, she also says no to her possible future of staying in Moab and marrying again and having a normal life. In becoming a widow with Naomi, she will be the poorest of the poor in Israel. Without a father, a husband, a son to provide for a woman, there is no means of support whatsoever. It's, we talk about what is set up in the law so she can glean, but that's just for the harvest. There's no way for them to be assured of survival. So she's very much on the edge, and yet nonetheless she does that. We also see in the relationship between the two women a parallel with what we'll encounter later. Because Ruth and Naomi are a younger and an older woman, as are Mary and Elizabeth. And as in their coming together, we have a remarkable example of how women support one another and how generations work together. Again, that transmission of the covenant or that furthering of God's kingdom, how that needs to happen from one generation to the next. And here we see this enacted. So all the attributes are there in a concrete way, not only in their words, and in their actions, and in their relationships. And there's another parallel here, and that is in the men, between Boaz and Joseph. Each of them is a just man who takes on a woman into their lives, extends his protection to her and her to-be child. That means they will survive in a situation where they very likely would not have been able to survive without that. Each of them interprets the law in a way that goes beyond the letter of the law. It is about a more generous interpretation, whether it's the one that Boaz interprets or the one that Joseph does about choosing not to divorce Mary. Each of them takes into their life not only this woman, but the son-to-be. Now with Boaz, this will be his own child, but it will not be his heir. And in Joseph's case, this is not his child, and yet he takes on all the responsibilities of fatherhood. Each of them is a secondary character, perhaps, and yet they have a very pivotal role in the story. Without their saving action and their intervention, there is no future, and nothing will move ahead and happen in the story. And then lastly, there is the location, Bethlehem, which in Hebrew means the house of bread. With Naomi's return to Bethlehem and Obed's birth, the residents of Bethlehem are all abuzz, and centuries later they will be all stirred up again when 3 visitors come from the east in search of yet another newborn child. And so, Ruth, the Moabite woman, becomes the mother of Obed, who becomes the mother of Jesse, the father of Jesse, who becomes the father of David, the greatest king of Israel. And out of the line of David will come the Christ, the Messiah. So, remarkable story, remarkable connections. It doesn't really stand all by itself. It has a place there. I hope that by now you perhaps entered into the stories with your imagination as well as with your prayerful heart and your learning mind. If you have not, this is a great story to get started at. You might even do something as simple as write a letter that Ruth would have written to Orpah about what has happened. Maybe there's a caravan going through to Moab that will carry that to her, and so you decide to tell her what has transpired. At any rate, I encourage you in that. I know you're going to enjoy seeing this story from the other side next time with Naomi. I encourage you in that. I ask God's blessings upon you, and I